Welcome to this very special video in which we're going to primarily explore the relationship between the two ancient eras of these two civilizations which completely predate our own, which are known as the third and the fourth civilizations, the great epochs, the great eras, also known as the root races. Like, we're living in the fifth, and there was the third and the fourth, and before that, you know, you're talking about an impossibly long time ago. And the third root race is Lemuria, and the fourth root race is Atlantis. So we're going to be talking in this video about Lemuria and Atlantis as two ancient civilizations that predate our own as the fifth root race, the Aryan race it's known as in Theosophy. And they got this knowledge passed down from Tibetan masters who had this wisdom from time immemorial. But you see the evidence of Atlantis everywhere, and it's thanks to Plato and his work of Timaeus, the work of Timaeus, which talks about the ancient civilization of Atlantis and how it fell from water. And we see in the geological evidence, and we also see in the stories all around the world, that indeed there was a great cataclysm that did seem to impact the entire surface of the earth, which inevitably would have destroyed a huge part of whatever civilization existed around that time of 12,000 years ago or so. And this certainly corroborates with the evidence of incredible active journalists and researchers and novelists such as Graham Hancock, who have really done the due diligence and to look for the lost civilization that predates our own, which we know as Atlantis now because it was said to be in the Atlantic Ocean by Plato. And indeed we do see an awful lot of evidence of very ancient structures that are actually made with a very advanced understanding and lost technology that we don't fully understand with the technology that we use, or the methods that we use to cut stone and to build stone. And when you look far back into antiquity, you're looking at blocks of stone which are impossibly huge. Like Giza in Egypt is famous for these impossibly huge stones which are built on top of each other to great heights, to such accuracy that it's impossible for us to know how that was done. And even now we would really struggle to do that. As I say in the Egyptian course, there are only two machines in the world that can carry bricks of that kind of weight and to that kind of height, but they wouldn't be able to do it to that accuracy, and nor would we even work to that kind of accuracy of within a millimeter with a structure of that size. But that's a baby compared to some of the structures that you see at the Lebanon at Baalbek. That could be evidence of a race of giants. And if you think that's funny, then the evidence really does suggest that we used to be an awful lot bigger. And when you look at it, the fossil record shows that animals were always bigger. The sharks were huge, crocodiles were huge, lizards were absolutely massive. You know, they had these huge, like mastodons, and you know, which is reduced to the elephants. And you could even make a case of saying like the huge brachiosauruses became the giraffe. And the more you look at it, like, creatures were much bigger in the past, right? They were like, there was mega flora and fauna. So why should we be any different? The evidence shows that, you know, these impossibly large blocks of stone, well, like these, how would you lift them unless you were a giant race? So I think when you're looking at something like Egypt, you're quite likely looking at the Atlantean age. But then when you're looking at something like Baalbek, you might be even looking at the Lemurian age. So what we're kind of thinking is that there were giants certainly around in those days to at least be part of the process. Maybe we even looked up to them and worshipped them. And maybe we get bigger the farther back you go. And if you think there's no evidence for this, well, there is. It's for some reason that every time they find these bones, they always get lost. The Smithsonian has brought up thousands of these bones of giants and then keeps losing them. And it's a bit of a conspiracy. I mean, some people think it isn't a conspiracy, but it's all very strange how they keep losing all of these records. But you can find the evidence in terms of newspaper articles which show the person, the archaeologist, with the bones and so on, and then it will always say underneath, this was bought by the Smithsonian Institute, and then they always say they lost them. So there is something about the giants, but that's a bit of a side issue, really. All it points to is that there were ancient races that predated our own, that certainly were able to do things which we don't understand today, and we know those through the ancient writings as Lemuria, as say the third root race, and Atlantis. And what it seems to me is that you have almost like a Lemuria, which is a more refined civilization, much older, much more ancient, much more embedded into the sacred realm, much more honoring of the divine feminine, which is the subtle, had access to the portals that opened up to the stargates to different star systems, right? Because they were much more in their etheric body, they were able to much more freely move between different galaxies, which is something we'll go on to in another video about how that's possible the more you disidentify from the material body and more into your multi-dimensional nature and into the other bodies, which are far less restricted by the time and form-bound physical self and physical reality that we've become accustomed to over-identifying with within the scientific worldview that has sort of existed for the last 300 or 400 years to a great extent, has drowned out the sacred dimension. And this is really what this course is primarily addressing, is to bring back the need for reverence, deep reverence for the sacred dimension within ourselves, within each other, and within all of nature as one holistic, living, breathing being, which we might call Gaia or Mother Earth. Okay, so Lemuria had that down. They had access to what we call the fifth dimension. They were able to seamlessly move between all these subtle realms, whether you call it the other world, the fairy realm, the elven realm, the dragon realm. All of these realms were available to the Lemurians, who were very, very refined and worked in a deep, graceful way in harmony and synergy with the sacred earth. But eventually, for whatever reason, their civilization was destroyed by fire, by volcano. Very dramatic, okay? It's almost like the elements take it in turns to destroy the great epochs, the great advanced civilizations. But before that, Atlantis was emerging out of the Atlantic Ocean. So as Lemuria was drawing to the end of its time on Earth in the Pacific Ocean, but by great cataclysm of volcano, a little bit like Pompeii or something, then you had Atlantis rising up, okay? And so there was a time when they coexisted. Now Atlantis became far more obsessed with technology and with advanced systems that kind of are more masculine, whereas Lemuria is more feminine. Atlantis is really more masculine. This obsession with our own creations, obsession with technology. It becomes more in the way between us and the earth, and us and the sacred dimension. And I think that's really what I'm addressing in this course primarily, is that seems to be happening again, this war, if you like, between the masculine and the feminine. As you had this sort of interesting comparison between Lemuria, which honored the subtle and the divine feminine, and Atlantis, which honored the sort of the masculine, tendency to obsess over technology. You almost see that again happening now with the rise in technology, which is going to take us into the Internet of Things, the Internet of Bodies, the transhumanism, the intergalactic space race. All of these things are happening right now, and if we follow that trajectory forward, we'll eventuate into a very different society, which is more akin to something out of a science fiction movie, or at worst Brave New World on 1984, to quote Aldous Huxley, who was very steeped into the elite world, who were Darwinian. So it's an interesting subject. It's something that really does underpin the whole of this course. And of course, Atlantis was famously destroyed by water, by this great cataclysm, this huge flood, which survives in the ancient myths, the great flood myths. For example, Noah's Ark is perhaps the one that's most famous to the Western mind. But you have the great epic of Gilgamesh in Sumer, and you have these flood myths pretty much always around the world. So, there's definitely a lot of substance to this idea that there was a great civilization that we now know as Atlantis. It probably wasn't called Atlantis at that time, which was destroyed by water. And so it seems to be now, as we become an advanced race, fifth time round, so to speak, that you almost have this kind of emerging Atlantean thing kind of happening again. But what I'm speaking to in this course is we also have this emerging of this return to honor the sacred dimension, to honor the divine feminine again, which is being largely repressed, I would say. I mean, Mother Mary survives very strongly in the Catholic tradition, but the other aspects of the divine feminine are not always so revered and honored as the pure, innocent mother archetype. For example, that the sort of the primal, the more primal divine creatrix kind of archetypes have been largely ignored by the more patriarchal, monotheistic religions, which have dominated the Western mindset for a very long time, really. And of course, none of the sacred dimensions, whether it's divine feminine or divine masculine, really get honored at all when we obsess over our reductionist, materialist outlook, which science has really begun to take over our perception, and our worldview has almost become severed, divorced from the realm of the sacred dimension within us and within each other and within nature. And because of these sort of enlightenment, quote unquote, enlightenment movement thinkers, such as Francis Bacon, and where they reduce everything to being like a machine. Everything is there for the dominion of mankind. Everything is there to be kind of dominated, really, in a way. And this sort of, and this sort of Darwinian outlook, which goes even beyond the work of Charles Darwin himself, really reduces everything to sort of survival of the fittest, competition, and promotes the idea of really, get on top. And it really does in some ways encourage this warlike mentality, which I really do hope came to its ultimate climax when the whole world came to war during the Second World War. So I really don't think we need another one. But then the mind is always at war, this polarity between the masculine and the feminine, until we really do the alchemy, until we really do the yoga, to come into the excluded middle of the Vesica Pisces that joins as the sacred union in the deep presence of our unified field, as we honor both the Ida and Pingala, as we say in yoga, which is Isis and Osiris in ancient Egypt, which is the divine masculine and divine feminine, the solar and lunar currents. We all have these twin serpents moving up through us to create the toroidal field that is our aura, in the same way that this rises up through the center of our majestic planet Earth as well to create this beautiful matrix of reality. So really it's time to pay attention, because history does tend to repeat itself. These great eras are called cycles for a reason, because we keep returning, but things are never the same. We're always moving around with the Earth and moving around the sun, but also everything is always moving forward in greater cycles, like the sun moves around Sirius, and so there's always a sense of moving forward, not just as a cycle destined to repeat itself, but as a spiral. Okay, so we're spiraling into this repetition of returning to this dance between the divine masculine and feminine, playing out in these great movements within our society. And the divine, it's not really the divine masculine, but there's a masculine, almost like the shadow of the masculine, which seeks to kind of control and dominate every aspect of the world in order to stay safe. We might call that an emerging new world order that looks to have global governance and surveillance and mass data collection and biometric data on every single person. Well, no matter where you are, no matter what you're doing, everything is kind of tracked. There's kind of very dystopian, overbearing, controlling, authoritarian society. As I say, much like 1984, Aldous Huxley's Brave New World. So, you know, which is all to do with this obsession over technology, which becomes something which divorces ourselves from our immortal spiritual nature when it gets to the point of transhumanism, very much so. And we'll talk about all of these subjects in a lot more detail, one by one, as they all entwine to create two different narratives. So the Atlantean one is something that we really have to hold in check. And it's like technology needs to always be working for us, and we never want to get to the point where we are slaves to our own creation, slaves to artificial intelligence, like in the Matrix. We never want to be slaves to our own technology. So they always have to keep that technology in check, and the way that we do that is to counterbalance the divine feminine wisdom of working in harmony with our sacred earth, and really I would say the divine masculine as well, which is this idea of deep reverence for the sacred dimension, which is the eternal, timeless, infinite dimension of the source, which is omnipresent, which is always here. Okay, so that's how we keep technology in check. I don't think we should ever merge with our technology. It should always be something that is there to work in synergy with our natural biorhythms and with the spiritual dimension, using it to amplify and harness what is natural, and not to try and replicate or imitate what is natural by creating something that is unnatural, which there is something about electricity which is coming from a lower realm of existence. Okay, we want to be creating technology from an appreciation of the spiritual dimension, so it becomes refined. This is really important. It's really a time to bring back the sacred, to bring back the honoring of the magic, and understanding the magic and wonder and spiritual dimension of this entire planet, of which we are an expression of as humanity and as individual human beings as well. Okay, this is so important if we are going to really continue to accelerate with our technology. We have to accelerate even more with our spiritual work, with our inner work, and with our ability to reclaim not only the parts of us within this lifetime, but within all of our multi-dimensional selves and within all the different realms of existence as well. Like I explained, Lemuria was very tapped into, and Atlantis was too, to a certain degree. But it's almost we've been kind of falling from grace a little bit, and we need to rise up again from the darkness of over-identifying with the material realm, and like a phoenix rise up and to fully reclaim our spiritual nature, so we do return to a golden age once again, and we fully honor this emerging awakened human being within a collective conscious tribe of awakened humanity, where we honor the individual diversity of life, but we realize that we are ultimately all one, and that's how we co-create a new earth together. Thank you for listening. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one.